Okay, we're recording. Hello everyone, this is the Fifth Epical Revelation Fellowship. I'm Reverend Dr. Roger Hall. And we're going to have a small group tonight. That's okay. We're going to talk about government on a neighboring planet. And that is paper 72. And let's say a quick prayer and we'll get started. Father, thank you for bringing us together for this study tonight. It's a wonderful paper. We thank you for the opportunity to share this with others. Please bless this meeting tonight. We say this in your Son's name, Jesus. Amen. Okay. We have 3 readers tonight. My wife, Millie, and I. So it's going to be kind of a quick turnaround tonight.
Well, Ronnie will be joining us later.
Yeah, Ronnie may be joining us later. Let's get started. Millie, would you like to take the first one?
I can do that. Paper 72, Government on a Neighboring Planet. By permission, Lanaforge, and with the approval of the Most High's intention, I am authorized to narrate something of the social, moral, and political life of the most advanced human race living on a not far distant planet belonging to the Satania system.
Okay, this is very important, this very first paragraph, because by the permission of Lanaforge, we know who Lanaforge is, don't we? He's our system sovereign. He replaced Lucifer, right? Okay, and by the approval of the Most High, that's basically the highest types of courts or beings in our local universe that watches over everything. See, so everyone, this had to be approved by these beings in order to relay this information to a planet that is not in quarantine. That a planet that is in quarantine. Okay, and the interesting thing is, this planet we're going to talk about tonight was also in the quarantine. Okay, but it is the most advanced planet in our system, and they kind of mirror Urantia. They're about on the same level of Urantia. Okay, which makes this very, very interesting that they've done well on the planet, better than we have. Okay, so that's why it makes this very important. All right, here, would you take the next one?
Of all the Satania worlds which became isolated because of participation in the Lucifer Rebellion, this planet has experienced a history most like that of Urantia. The similarity of the 2 spheres undoubtedly explains why permission to make this extraordinary presentation was granted, for it is most unusual for the system rulers to consent to the narration on one planet of the affairs of another.
There it is.
Okay.
So they normally don't let them do this, tell what's going on from one planet to another, especially in quarantine.
And especially one so close to us.
That's right. This planet, like Urantia, was led astray by the disloyalty of its planetary prince in connection with the Lucifer Rebellion. It received the material sun shortly after Adam came to Urantia, and this sun also defaulted, which is very interesting, right? Leaving the sphere isolated, since a magisterial sun has never been bestowed upon its mortal races. Okay, so their material sun came shortly after the Adam on our planet arrived. So we know ours is 37,500,000 years ago, right? Or 37,000 years, 37,500 years ago. So it was after that they received their material sun, and he also defaulted. He followed his leader into rebellion also.
Are you saying Adam is a material sun?
Adam is a material sun. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when they got their Adam or their material sun, he also defaulted, just like Adam did. Okay. Now they don't say that he defaulted in the same way, or other than he must have fallen his ruler into the Lucifer rebellion. But that was only 37,000 years ago that Adam came, so this happened after that. So the rebellion had been going on for quite some time, which makes it kind of interesting.
And also, the magisterial son has not arrived on the
Has
planet.
not arrived. Now,
Which
we
is
had
where
a
Jesus-
creator son,
We had a creator
right,
son, right.
that came to our planet, but the magisterial son is normally the next son that arrives, and he has not arrived on that planet yet, right? Okay.
We have not had a magisterial son.
That's correct. That should be probably the next son we'll see in line, that'll arrive on our planet is the magisterial son also. Now, interesting though, the magisterial son may not come for another 10, 30,000, 50,000 years from now. We don't know. But the reason being the magisterial son may come later than what is anticipated, and Jesus was ready to do his final bestowal. So he chose the point in which he wanted to bestow himself, right? Which is not according to any schedule whatsoever, right?
It was his schedule.
It was his schedule, that's right. Not the normal schedule for a planet, that's what I should say. Okay, Millie, would you take the next one? The continental nation?
1. The continental nation, notwithstanding all the planetary handicaps of a very superior civilization, is evolving on an isolated continent about the size of Australia. This nation numbers about 140 million. Its people are a mixed race, predominantly blue and yellow, having a slightly greater proportion of the violet than the so-called white race on Urantia. These different races are not yet fully blended, but they fraternize and socialize very acceptably. The average length of life on this continent is now 90 years, 15% higher than that of any people on the planet, any other people on the planet.
All right, this is interesting too because they mentioned the violet race here, mixing with the blue and the yellow on this continent. So if the violet race is mixing with the blue and the yellow, that means the magisterial son the material son, or their Adam, did a partial job also, just like they did on this planet, right? So they did get some of the violet blood, maybe more than we did.
There are fewer people though.
But there's fewer people, that's right. So the mixing of the blood would be more potent, right, of the violet blood than happened with us. But they did get a partial mixing of the violet blood. That's why it makes it so like us, because we got a partial mixing of the violet blood too. Not the full quota, but a partial mixing. Makes it very interesting. And this is kind of a picture of the continental nation. It's about the size of Australia, the neighboring planet. All right?
It's pretty tiny, really.
Pretty tiny compared to... Australia is smaller than the United States. So, okay. Dear, would you take the next one?
The industrial mechanism of this nation enjoys a certain great advantage derived from the unique topography of the continent. The high mountains on which heavy rains fall 8 months in the year are situated at the very center of the country. This natural arrangement favors the utilization of water power and greatly facilitates the irrigation of the more arid western quarter of the continent.
Okay, so all the water runs downhill from the center of the continent all the way out to all parts of the continent. And their western area of the continent is arid like ours is, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have an arid population in the western part. Okay? These people are self-sustaining. That is, they live indefinitely without importing anything from the surrounding nations. Their natural resources are replete. And by scientific techniques, they have learned how to compensate for their deficiencies in the essentials of life. They enjoy a brisk domestic commerce, but have little foreign trade owing to universal hostility of their less progressive neighbors. So unlike us, we have a very large domestic trade. They have a very large trade outside our country, and they have very little trade outside their country, so they're pretty self-sustaining.
It's strange that they would describe them as being only 150 million, And yet they don't, so they really, do they go into detail really about the other people? Are they also barbarians still?
They're barbarians, pretty much.
So this planet is very much like ours, we still have our own
Yeah.
quota
yeah.
of
Because if
barbarians.
you look outside the United States, we have large continents that are pretty much still barbarian, if you think about it. Some of them are civilized very, very highly, but others, all they want to do is war, right? So, and I consider that a barbarian people when they don't want to do anything but war constantly against another nation. Okay. This continental nation in general followed the evolutionary trend of the planet. The development of the tribal stage to the appearance of strong rulers and kings occupied thousands of years. The unconditional monarchs were succeeded by many different orders of government, aborted republics, communal states, dictators came and went in endless profusion. This growth continued till about 500 years ago when during a politically fermenting period, one of the nation's powerful dictator triumvirs had a change of heart. He volunteered to abdicate upon the condition that one of the other rulers, the baser of the remaining two, would also vacated his dictatorship. Thus was the sovereignty of the continent placed in the hands of one ruler. The unified state progressed under strong monarchical. Hang on, I got that message. Okay. Where's my place now?
Monarchical.
Rule for over 100 years, during which were evolved a masterful charter of liberty. I'd love to read that, wouldn't you? Really interesting. Wonder if it looks a lot like our Constitution.
Yeah.
Okay, Millie.
Yes. The subsequent transition from monarchy to a representative form of government was gradual. The kings remained as mere social or sentimental figureheads, finally disappearing when the male line of descent ran out. The present republic has now been in existence just 200 years, during which time there has been a continuous progression toward the governmental techniques about to be narrated, the last developments in industrial and political realms having been made within the past decade.
Only 10 years, right? This was 1934, so we've been under the system for 60 years now, right?
2. Political organization. The continental nation now has a representative government with a centrally located national capital. The central government consists of a strong federation of 100 comparatively free states. These states elect their governors and legislators for 10 years, and none are eligible for re-election. State judges are appointed for life by the governors and confirmed by their legislatures, which consist of one representative for each 100,000 citizens.
Really similar to ours. 100 states, and then the judges are elected or appointed for life, much like our Supreme Court judges are. There are 5 different types of metropolitan government, depending on the size of the city, but no city is permitted to have more than 1 million inhabitants. On the whole, these municipal governing schemes are very simple, direct, and economical. The few offices of the city administration are keenly sought by the highest types of citizens. Really?
Yes. The federal government embraces 3 coordinate divisions: executive, legislative, and judicial. The federal chief executive is elected every 6 years by universal territorial suffrage. He is not eligible for re-elections except upon the petition of at least 75% of the state legislatures, concurred in by respective state governors, and then but for 1 term. He is advised by a super cabinet composed of all living ex-chief executives.
Well, that would be refreshing, wouldn't it? They don't stay in office but for 1 term. That's pretty nice. That's what we need in this country. And get rid of a lot of the problems. Okay.
The legislative division embraces 3 houses.
Go ahead and do the first one.
1, the upper house is elected by industrial, professional, agricultural, and other groups of workers, balloting in accordance with economic function.
The lower house is elected by certain organizations of society embracing the social, political, and philosophic groups not including any industry or the professions. All citizens are in good standing participate in the election of both classes of representatives, but they are differently grouped depending on whether the election pertains to the upper or lower house.
So that allows them to be better informed.
That's right. And they only elect people in the area in which they live in and are expert in, right? Millie.
3, the third house, the elder statesman, embraces the veterans of civic service and includes many distinguished persons nominated by the chief executive, by the regional sub-federal executives, by the chief of the Supreme Tribunal, and by the presiding officers of either of the other legislative houses. This group is limited to 100, and its members are elected by the majority action of the elder statesmen themselves. Membership is for life, and when vacancies occur, the person receives the largest ballot among the list of nominees is thereby duly elected. The scope of this body is purely advisory, but it is a mighty regulator of public opinion and exerts a powerful influence upon all branches of the government.
Okay, so understand this. The third house, they basically have taken the wisest of their statesmen and made them the third house, right? So they have the absolute wisest and absolute best people they can find as the third house. And they kind of oversee the other 2 houses to make sure that they stay in check, right? Which is a very good idea, right?
Very much of the federal administrative work is carried on by the 10 regional sub-federal authorities, each consisting of the association of 10 states. These regional divisions are wholly executive and administrative, having neither legislative nor judicial functions. The 10 regional executives are the personal appointees of the federal chief executive, and their term of office is concurrent with his 6 years. The Federal Supreme Tribunal approves the appointment of these 10 regional executives, and while they may not be reappointed, the retiring executive automatically becomes the associate and advisor of his successor. Otherwise, these regional chiefs choose their own cabinets of administrative officials.
Okay, so they're limited to 6 years, right? And then they are replaced. That keeps them from becoming what? Wealthy in these positions like they do in this country, right? It's not about money there. This nation is adjudicated by 2 major court systems, the law courts and the socio-economic courts. The law courts function on the following 3 levels. 1, the minor courts of municipal and local jurisdiction. Those decisions may be appealed to the high state tribunals. Millie, take the next one.
2, state supreme courts, whose decisions are final in all matters not involving the federal government or jeopardy of citizenship rights and liberties. The regional executives are empowered to bring any case at once to the bar of the federal Supreme Court.
So the state court, if they choose, they can push it up to the federal court. Right?
So, do these courts, are they in charge of all the planet or just this one little area?
This one area, this one continent, that's it.
Okay, so they have to have some kind of military.
Yeah, we're going to talk
We're gonna-
about that
okay.
a little bit later. Yeah.
We'll get to that.
Okay. 3, Federal Supreme Court, the high tribunal for the adjudication of national contentions and the appellate cases coming up from the state courts. This Supreme Tribunal consists of 12 men over 40 and under 75 years of age who have served 2 or more years on some state tribunal and who have been appointed to this high position by the Chief Executive with the majority approval of the Super Cabinet and the Third House of the Legislative Assembly. All decisions of this Supreme Judicial Body are by at least a 2/3 vote.
Roger, we're out of focus again.
Are we?
We are,
Okay,
yeah.
hang on just one
Do you
second.
move this camera?
No.
I read from my book, but for the
Yeah,
videos.
this is only the one that's coming through that's out of focus, only you see, Millie.
Okay.
Okay, so if you're reading for your book, it doesn't matter that much. And it may come back in a minute. Okay, the socio-economic courts function in the following 3 divisions. These are the socio-economic courts, right? Social. 1, parental courts, associated with the legislative and executive divisions of the home and social systems. So these are courts of parents about social issues having to do with family affairs, right? 2, educational courts, the jurisdictional bodies connected with the state and regional school systems and associated with the executive and legislative branches of the educational administrative mechanism. So they have separate courts just for the educational system. So if there's an issue about any school or anything going on in any school, it goes to these courts, right? And 3, the industrial courts, the jurisdictional tribunals vested with full authority for the settlement of all economic misunderstandings. Anything having to do with industry or money and things like that is handled in these courts. Sounds like a pretty good system, doesn't it? Millie, let's take the next one.
The federal Supreme Court does not pass upon socioeconomic cases except upon the 3/4 vote of the 3rd legislative branch of the national government, the House of Elder Statesmen. Otherwise, all decisions of the parental, educational, and industrial high courts are final.
So these courts have total rule over these areas, right?
3, the home life. On this continent, it is against the law for 2 families to live under the same roof. And since group dwellings have been outlawed, most of the tenement type of buildings have been demolished. But the unmarried still live in clubs, hotels, and other group dwellings. The smallest home site permitted must provide 50,000 square feet of land. All land and other property used for home purposes are free from taxation up to 10 times the minimum home site allotment.
So they don't pay taxes, property taxes, right? And there's only one family per house. If you're not married, you have to live in one of the clubs, hotels, or group dwellings, one of the 3. The home life of this people has greatly improved during the last century. Attendance of parents, both fathers and mothers, at the parental schools of child culture is compulsory. Even the agriculturalists who reside in small country settlements can carry on this work by correspondence, going to the nearby centers for oral instruction once in 10 days, every 2 weeks, for they maintain a 5-day week.
The average number of children in each family is 5, and they are under the full control of their parents, or, in case of the demise of one or both, under that of the guardians designated by the parental court. It is considered a great honor for any family to be awarded the guardianship of a full orphan. Competitive examinations are held among parents, and the orphan is awarded to the home of those displaying the best parental qualifications. I'm getting an awful lot of feedback when I read.
Really? Well, here.
These people regard the home as the basic institution of their civilization. It is expected that the most valuable part of a child's education and character training will be secured from his parents and at home, and fathers devote almost as much attention to child culture as do mothers.
Also,
That first sentence says everything. These people regard the home as the basic institution of their civilization.
that's right, it's the institution of society. Just like it says in the Urantia book, it should be on this planet, right? The home life.
Maybe we'll get there.
Yeah, maybe so.
Well, our work ethic has something to do with it because people work so many hours.
Yeah, that's eventually going to have to stop. You know, when you're working over 40 hours a week, it's hard to keep up with children and meals and all that stuff. You know, that our work week time is going to have to be reduced.
Well, the commute time is extensive here in Atlanta, and so,
Yeah,
I mean, it has to do with the way the cities are laid out, how
Yeah.
they're organized.
that's right. All sex instruction is administered in the home by parents or by legal guardians, not in the schools. Do you see that? Moral instruction is offered by teachers during the rest period in the school shops, but not so with the religious training, which is deemed to be the exclusive privilege of parents, religion being looked upon as an integral part of home life. Purely religious instruction is given publicly only in the temples of philosophy. No such exclusive religious institution as the Urantia churches have developed among these people. In their philosophy, religion is the striving to know God and to manifest love for one's fellows through service for them. But this is not the typical of the religious status of the other nations on this planet. So this is the outline Jesus wanted us to have, wasn't it? The study of striving to know God and the manifesting of love for one's fellows, right? Right. Religion is so entirely a family matter among these people that there is no public places devoted exclusively to religious assembly. Politically, church and state, as Urantians are wont to say, are entirely separate, but there is a strange overlapping of religion and philosophy. Y'all understand what they're talking about there. Religion is the study of God, right? And those things having to do with God. And philosophy is the study of wisdom, right? Having wisdom of the information about God, right? All right. Millie. Turn your mic back on, Millie.
I've got it. Did they have Jesus on their planet?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
It's
So they
interesting,
don't-
though. It's interesting, Millie, that they got the concept, even though Jesus didn't come to their planet. Apparently, their magisterial son started to teach them properly, probably before he defaulted.
Their materials.
The material son, right? Their Adam, and probably their planetary prince had a staff just like we did, and they probably started teaching them properly too. So. All right.
Okay. Until 20 years ago, the spiritual teachers, comparable to Urantia pastors, who visited each family periodically to examine the children to ascertain if they had been properly instructed by their parents, were under governmental supervision. These spiritual advisors and examiners are now under the direction of the newly created Foundation of Spiritual Progress, an institution supported by voluntary contributions. Possibly this institution may not further evolve until after the arrival of a Paradise Magistrate son. Why is that?
Because they've started the process of teaching the importance of spirituality, but they're waiting for a magisterial son to learn the direction in which to take that. And the direction in which to take that would be trying to get all nations towards the concept of spirituality or light and life, right? So that's why they've done it that way. And it's probably from the material son that they learned these things. right?
A question, are they responsible for the spiritual development of the other civilizations on that planet?
No,
No evangelistic
No.
movements.
there's
Yeah.
no,
That the whole planet as a whole cannot go forward.
not as a whole, they cannot, but they have already started sending out emissaries to the other barbarian nations, okay? And that's what will make the change over time. But having the fact that that continent has evolved so quickly into society, into a very workable society, that should be very easy to influence the other countries to, because of the benefits to come along with them sooner or later.
Well, and they wouldn't be as vulnerable because they would have to send ships or whatever mode
Yeah.
of transportation they have to overtake them.
That's right.
So they have been allowed the privilege of growing exponentially.
And an interesting thing about this, which people don't want to hear, is that it is the responsibility of this continent eventually, if the barbarians and the continents around them don't eventually start to evolve and come up and become more spiritual, that sort of thing, it will be the responsibility of this continent to wipe them out. Because
Oh,
yeah, I mean that's the way it works. If just like Abraham went around warring against other tribes and that sort of thing, because they did not believe the way Abraham did, right? So it will become the responsibility of this nation for those who cannot be converted to a more civilized form of life, they won't be allowed to stay around indefinitely, right?
sounds like the Muslims. If you don't believe like me, we're going to wipe you out.
Well, it's not in the same way though, Millie. The difference is this. They try to send out emissaries and bring the continents up to specs every way humanly possible before they would do this. You see what I'm saying? But it'd be like, eventually, if you're trying to, it would be like trying to take gorillas and teach them religion if they were very barbaric and they were killing other beings, then eventually you'd have to wipe them out because you could not live with them, right? So, and that's the way they look at it. It's part of the evolving of the planet. That's all there is to it. And it happens on every single planet, all of them. So, and that's a hard thing to understand and accept. So, all right, who's up? I've lost. I think you are
Okay. Children remain legally subject to their parents until they are 15, when the first initiation into civic responsibility is held. Thereafter, every 5 years for 5 successive periods, similar public exercises are held for such age groups at which their obligations to parents are lessened, while new civic and social responsibilities to the state are assumed. Suffrage is conferred at 20. The right to marry without parental consent is not bestowed until 25, and children must leave home on reaching the age of 30.
So it's very specific what has to happen. You don't have people at after the age of 30 laying around the house and making mom and dad take care of you, right? You have to get out at the age of 30. And what's interesting about this too is if you have people that are subnormal and won't do these things, they put them to work in the mines, as laborers. So it probably gives them a pretty good push out to be useful to society. Okay, marriage and divorce laws are uniform throughout the nation. Marriage before 20, the age of civil enfranchisement, is not permitted. Permission to marry is only granted after 1 year's notice of intention. So you have to be 20 and you have to give notice that you want to get married and be engaged for a year, right? And after both bride and groom present certificates showing that they have been duly instructed in parental schools regarding the responsibilities of married life. So they train everyone what marriage is about.
And that's what Adam and Eve did.
And that's exactly what Adam and Eve did. That's right. Millie?
Divorce regulations are somewhat lax, but decrees of separation issued by the parental courts may not be had until 1 year after application therefore has been recorded. And the year on this planet is considerably longer than on Urantia. Notwithstanding their easy divorce laws, the present rate of divorces is only 1/10 that of civilized races on Urantia.
So they have to have even after they want to get a divorce, they have to stay together for the period of a year on this planet, whatever that is. It's longer than our year. So they have to hang around with each other for the whole year, right? So probably many of them have a reconciliation because they've been together during that period of year. They decide they don't want to divorce after all. So it's very interesting. And the divorce rate is 1/10 of ours. So it seems like it's a pretty good system.
For the educational system of this nation is compulsory and coeducational in the pre-college schools that the student attends from the ages of 5 to 18. These schools are vastly different from those of Urantia. There are no classrooms, only one study is pursued at a time, and after the first 3 years, all pupils become assistant teachers, instructing those below them. Books are used only to secure information that will assist in solving the problems arising in the school shops and on the school farms. Much of the furniture used on the continent and the many mechanical contrivances. This is a great age of invention and mechanization, are produced in these shops. Adjacent to each shop is a working library where the students may consult the necessary reference books. Agriculture and horticulture are also taught throughout the entire educational period on the extensive farms adjoining every local school.
Well, that sounds like a great educational
It does,
system.
wow.
I don't know, it sounds confusing to me.
Really?
Really? What do you think is confusing about it?
How would you begin to manufacture something if you don't know how to? When do you learn to? How can you learn to read and go to the library and get the information you need? Where does all that come in? The basics.
Well, it's
that
only
kind
one study at a time.
Yeah, you only do one study at a time. For instance, as you're let's say you were 6 years old, they'll start with reading. And that's all they teach you is reading, how to read books and that sort of thing. The next year would be mathematics. So the whole year you spend your time on nothing but learning mathematics. And then the next year you would start on the sciences, right? And you learn nothing but science. And then when you get a little bit older, 12, 13, they'll start you on the skilled type things, like woodworking and mechanics and metalworking and things like that, home economics, those sort of things. So, and that's how these libraries attach to them, because they've already learned to read and write and that sort of thing. They can go into libraries and study how to do what they're interested in learning to do, right? So, sounds like an interesting educational system. Who's up? Me? The feeble-minded are trained only in agriculture and animal husbandry, and are committed for life to special custodial colonies, where they are segregated by sex to prevent parenthood, which is denied of all subnormals. This is what Adam and Eve was supposed to do on our planet, right? These restrictive measures have been in operation for 75 years. The commitment degrees are handed down by the parental court. So if the parental court decides you're mentally ill or feeble-minded, this is what happens to you. You're sent to the agriculture or the animal husbandry colonies. And that's what you do for the rest of your life. You're not allowed to marry, you're not allowed to intermingle with other sexes, because they don't want to reproduce defective humans.
Everyone takes 1 month vacation each year. The pre-college schools are conducted for 9 months out of the year of 10, the vacation being spent with parents or friends in travel. The travel is a part of the adult education program and is continued throughout a lifetime. The funds for meeting such expenses being accumulated by the same methods as those employed in old age insurance.
And these are mandatory payments you have to make out of your salary each pay, right? One for old age and one for vacations. So that when the vacation time comes up, you're prepared financially to be able to do this, because they feel like it's so important that you do these things, okay?
Can they travel to someplace off of their island?
Yeah, but they wouldn't want to, Millie, because if all the continents around them are so barbaric, there'd be too much danger of them getting murdered, you know, by the barbarians. So they probably vacation around the own continent. And this is the part of the education process, because by going to other parts of the continent, they get a feel for what happens all over the continent eventually, right?
They don't have Disney World or Dollywood.
We don't know, maybe not, you know.
Do they water ski? Do they snow ski?
Who knows?
What do they look like?
Yeah.
One quarter of the school time is devoted to play, competitive athletics, the pupils progressing in these contests from the local through the state and regional and on to the national trials of skill and prowess. Likewise, the oratorical and musical contests, as well as those in science and philosophy, occupy the attention of students from the lower social divisions on up to the contest for national honors.
So that's how the system works. So they may have baseball teams or whatever kind of ball or stuff that they have. The school government is a replica of the national government. With its three correlated branches, the teaching staff functions as the third or adversary legislative division.
Advisory.
Advisory.
Legislative division. The brain went on
Took three of
vacation.
us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Millie.
The chief object of education on this continent is to make every pupil a self-supporting citizen.
When you're reading out loud, regular words look strange.
They do.
Sometimes they do, you're right.
They throw you.
You're up again, Millie.
After Diane, you read.
I just did.
Oh, okay. Where is it? Every child?
Yes, every child graduating.
Every child graduating from the pre-college school system at 18 is a skilled artisan. Then begins the study of books and the pursuit of special knowledge, either in the adult schools or in the colleges. When a brilliant student completes his work ahead of schedule, he is granted an award of time and means wherewith he may execute some pet project of his own devising. The entire educational system is designed to adequately train the individual. Hallelujah.
I know, that's
Really?
nice, I like that. 5, industrial organization. The industrial situation among this people is far from their ideals. Capital and labor still have their troubles, but both are becoming adjusted to the plan of sincere cooperation. On this unique continent, the workers are increasingly becoming shareholders in all industrial concerns. Every intelligent laborer is slowly becoming a small capitalist.
What do we have in
Last Call Church Ministry, Pakistan.
Okay, so in the industry, all the workers are becoming part owners, shareholders in the industry they're in. So that gives them a opportunity to become capitalists in the sense that they can make money from whatever they're working on. But social antagonisms are lessening and goodwill is growing apace. No grave economic problems have arisen out of the abolition of slavery over 100 years ago. That's about when we got rid of our slavery. Since this adjustment was effected gradually by the liberation of 2% each year, those slaves who satisfactorily passed mental, moral, and physical tests were granted citizenship. Many of these superior slaves were war captives or children of such captives. Some 50 years ago, they deported the last of their inferior slaves, and still more recently, they are addressing themselves to the task of reducing the number of the degenerate and vicious classes. So they're shipping them out of the country, the ones that are not in the mines.
It's unbelievable.
I know, it's hard, it really is hard to believe.
Yeah, especially if it's your child.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
These people have recently developed new techniques for the adjustment of industrial misunderstandings and for the correction of economic abuses, which are marked improvements over their old methods of settling such problems. Violence has been outlawed as a procedure in adjusting either personal or industrial differences. Wages, profits, and other economic problems are not rigidly regulated, but they are in general controlled by the industrial legislatures, while all disputes arising out of industry are passed upon by the industrial courts.
The industrial courts are only 30 years old, but are functioning very satisfactorily. The most recent development provides that hereafter, the industrial courts shall recognize legal compensation as falling in 3 divisions. 1. Legal rates of interest on invested capitals. 2. Reasonable salary for skill employed in industrial operations. 3. Fair and equitable wages for labor.
That's where most of the problems come from, isn't it? All right. These shall first be met in accordance with contract, or in the face of decreased earnings they shall share proportionally in transient reduction. And thereafter all earnings in excess of these fixed charges shall be regarded as dividends, and shall be prorated to all 3 divisions, capital, skill, and labor.
This all seems like a template, to me.
It does,
It's,
doesn't it? How to
It's
run a
very,
country, yeah.
yeah, very philosophical, but very idealistic.
Yeah.
Um,
Really?
Every 10 years, the regional executives adjust and decree the lawful hours of daily gainful toil. Industry now operates on a 5-day week, working 4 and playing 1. These people labor 6 hours each working day, and like students, 9 months of the year of 10. In the year of 10.
They
I
only
guess
have
their
10
year
months.
has 10 months.
That's right.
Vatican, vacation is usually spent in travel, and new methods of transportation have been recently developed. The whole nation is travel bent. The climate favors travel about 8 months of the year, and they are making the most of their opportunities. Yay, yay.
Yeah. All right, so they have a 6-hour work day, and they only work 4 of the 5 days a week, and one of the days is set aside for playing while you're at work, I guess, with your other people. So you socialize with the people you work with too. Okay.
200 years ago, the profit motive was wholly dominant in industry, but today it is being rapidly displaced by other and higher driving forces. Competition is keen on this continent, but much of it has been transferred from industry to play, skill, scientific achievement, and intellectual attainment. It is most active in social service and governmental loyalty. Among this people, public service is rapidly becoming the chief goal of ambition. The richest man on the continent works 6 hours a day in the office of his machine shop, and then hastens over to the local branch of the School of Statesmanship, where he seeks to qualify for public service.
How about that? Thanks.
It says that they labor, they have a 5-day work week. They do not have 7 days. The
No.
industry operates on a 5-day week.
Yeah, they have 2 days of leisure for themselves. The 5 days they're talking about, 4 of it is working 6 hours a day, and the 5th day is for play at work.
And the other 2 days are their own.
Are their own, that's right, for their family and that sort of thing.
Cut the grass and
Yeah.
cook out on the barbie.
Labor is becoming more honorable on this continent, and all able-bodied citizens over 18 work either at home and on farms at some recognized industry on the public works where the temporarily unemployed are absorbed, or else in the core of the compulsory laborers in the mine. So if you're unemployed, you work on the public works. You clean sweeps, streets, that sort of thing. And if they can't find you a place there, then you become a compulsory laborer in their mines, which probably you wouldn't want to do. So that would give you a good indication of why you'd want to stay employed, right?
Yeah. These people are also beginning to foster a new form of social disgust. Disgust for both idleness and unearned wealth. Yea, slowly but certainly they are conquering their machines. Once they, too, struggled for political liberty and subsequently for economic freedom. Now they are now entering upon an enjoyment of both, while in addition they are beginning to appreciate their well-earned leisure, which can be devoted to increased self-realization.
Yeah.
6, old age insurance. This nation is making a determined effort to replace the self-respect destroying type of charity by dignified government insurance guarantees of security in old age. This nation provides every child an education and every man a job. Therefore, can it successfully carry out such an insurance scheme for the protection of the infirm and aged?
So they take care of their age
And their ill.
and their
Infirm,
ill.
yeah.
Among this people, all persons must retire from gainful pursuit at 65, unless they are secured a permit from the State Labor Commissioner, which will entitle them to remain at work until the age of 70. This age limit does not apply to government servers, or philosophers. The physically disabled or permanently crippled can be replaced on the retired list at any age by court order, undersigned by the Pension Commission of the regional government. What's going on here?
Rodney, I just added him.
Oh,
It still has a red light though.
Rodney's picture just clicked up.
Yeah, I've got it online. Oops.
I'm here.
Hey, Rodney.
He's there.
Did I disconnect you, Millie?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes, we
we can hear
can.
you.
Okay.
okay. Billy, would you take the
When
next?
it's rains,
It is, it's, yeah, it's out of focus.
Yeah.
Can you read from, are you reading from your book, Rodney?
I am.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, rains.
How about
I
now?
got it.
Okay, it's fine.
The funds for old age pensions are derived from 4 sources. 1 day's earnings each month are requisitioned by the federal government for this purpose, and for this country, everybody works. In this country, everybody works. And 2 is bequest. Many wealthy citizens leave funds for this purpose. 3, the earnings of compulsory labor in the state mines. After conscript workers support themselves and set aside their own retirement contributions, all excess profits on their labor are turned over to this pension fund. 4, the income from natural resources. All natural wealth on the continent is held in a trust, a social trust, by the federal government, and the income therefrom is utilized for social purposes such as disease prevention, education of geniuses, and expenses of especially promising individuals in the statesmanship schools. 1/2 of the income from natural resources goes to the old age pension fund. That's a great idea.
Does this not sound like a plan for all governments, you know? 1 day's earnings each month are set aside for the old age fund. 1 day of each month. How hard is that?
Well, Social Security works if the government just hadn't spent it all.
Well, see, that's what I'm talking about. The public trust is the issue here, right? Moral public trust. When you have a public trust, those funds should never have been touched. I blame those who made the decision to go in and take that money. It's their fault that there's no Social Security. They should be made to replace that money and put it back, right? Never loan it out for some other reason. It was put there to take care of the elderly. Now we have lots of elderly and not enough money to take care of, right? So this is a great blueprint for us to follow right here, right? But in order to do that, you have to have moral leaders and take moral responsibility for their public trust and not be in office to be rich, but be in office to serve. That's the difference, right? And that's my speech about politics. And think about that when you go vote next week, right? All right. Rodney, who just read? Miller? Okay, you want to read next, Rodney?
Oh, pretty small. All those state and regional
Actuarial foundations.
foundations supply many forms of protected insurance. Old age pensions are solely administered by federal government through the 10 regional departments.
Okay. Oops. Let's go to-
These government funds have long been honestly administered. Next to treason and murder, the heaviest penalties meted out by the courts are attached to betrayal of public trust. Social and political disloyalty are now looked upon as being the most heinous of all crimes.
Okay, all you politicians, here it is, right? The government funds have been honestly administered. Next to treason, the murder, the heaviest penalties meted out is for betrayal of public trust. And that's what our politicians do every day.
That's right. That is
Right.
true. Some of them do.
Some of them,
We have
not all.
some wonderful politicians too.
Yeah. All right. 7, taxation. The federal government is paternalistic only in the administration of old age pensions and the fostering of genius and creative originality. The state governments are slightly more concerned with the individual citizen, while the local governments are the more paternalistic or socialistic. That's a long sentence, isn't it? The city or some subdivision thereof concerns itself with such matters as health, sanitation, building regulations, beautification, water supply, lighting, heating, recreation, music, and communication. That's what the taxation is about. Millie.
Okay. In all industry, first attention is paid to health. Certain phases of physical well-being are regarded as industrial and community prerogatives, but individual and family health problems are matters of personal concern only. In medicine, as in all other purely personal matters, it is increasingly the plan of government to refrain from interfering.
And they wouldn't have double and triple insurance fees, will they? Rodney, would you take the next one?
Hello, Rodney.
Yeah, my turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cities have no taxing. They go in debt. They receive capital allowances from the state.
We can't hear you, Rodney.
Others, pardon me?
We can't hear you.
You're breaking
going in
up
and out.
real bad.
You have a lot of vibration around your microphone.
For real?
Yeah.
Is this?
Yeah, that's better.
That's better, yeah.
Okay, I'll just pull it up closer.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about the phone. Cities have no taxing power, neither can they go in debt. They receive per capita allowances from the state treasury and must supplement such revenue from the earnings of their socialist enterprises and by licensing various social activities.
It's interesting, they can't go into debt, isn't it? The federal government's the same way. They can't go into debt more than a certain period of time, and that's only during the war.
The rapid transit facilities which make it practical greatly to extend the city boundaries are under municipal control. The city fire departments are supported by the Fire Prevention and Insurance Foundations, and all buildings in city or country are fireproof, have been for over 75 years.
So they have fireproof buildings. There is no municipally appointed peace officer. That's a tongue twister. The police forces are maintained by the state governments. This department is recruited almost entirely from the unmarried men between 25 and 50. Most of the states assess a rather heavy bachelor tax, which is remitted to all men joining the state police. In the average state, the police force is now only 1/10 as large as it was 50 years ago.
There is little or no uniformity among the taxation schemes of 100 comparatively free and sovereign states, as economic and other conditions vary greatly in different sections of the continent. Every state has 10 basic constitutional provisions which cannot be modified except by consent of the federal Supreme Court, and one of these articles prevents levying a tax of more than 1% on the value of any property in any one year, home sites, whether in city or country, being exempted.
So there's no high taxes there, property, is
The federal government cannot go in debt, and a 3/4 referendum is required before any state can borrow except for purposes of war. Since the federal government cannot incur debt in the event of war, the National Council of State is empowered to assist the states as well as for men and material, as it may be required. But no debt may run for more than 25 years.
Well, we'd be in trouble, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Income to support the federal government is derived from the following 5 sources.
We can read the first one.
1. Import duties. All imports are subject to a tariff designed to protect the standard of living on this continent, which is far above that of any other nation on the planet. These tariffs are set by the highest industrial court after both houses of the Industrial Congress have ratified the recommendations of the Chief Executive of Economic Affairs, who is the joint appointee of these 2 legislative bodies. The upper industrial house is elected by labor, the lower by capital.
2. Royalties. The federal government encouraged invention and original creations in the 10 regional laboratories, assisting all types of geniuses, artists, authors, and scientists in protecting their patents. In return, the government takes 1/2 of the profits realized from all such inventions and creations, whether pertaining to machines, books, artistry, plants, or animals. Really?
And the mic on. Inheritance tax, number 3. The federal government levies a graduated inheritance tax ranging from 1 to 50%, depending on the size of the estate, as well as on the other conditions.
Could you imagine 50%? Number 4, military equipment. The government earns a considerable sum from the leasing of military and Navy equipment for commercial and recreational uses.
So when their military is not active, they use that equipment, they lease the equipment to the public. Right? That way they keep the equipment for future war and things like that. If they need it, they can reenact it.
They
Right?
have to probably keep it upgraded too.
Yeah.
Excuse me, this is.
Yeah.
5, natural resources. The income from natural resources, when not fully required for the specific purposes designated in the Charter for Statehood, is turned into the national treasury. It's a train.
Federal appropriations, except war funds assessed by the National Council of Defense, are originated in the upper legislative house, occurred in by the lower house, approved by the chief executive, and finally validated by the Federal Budget Commission of 100. The members of this commission are nominated by the state governors and elected by the state legislatures to serve for 24 years, 1/4 being elected every 6 years. Every 6 years, this body, by a 3/4 ballot, choose one of its number as chief, and he therefore becomes director-controller of the federal treasury.
Eight, the special colleges. In addition to the basic compulsory education program extending from the ages of 5 to 18, special schools are maintained as follows.
Rodney.
Number 1, statesmanship school. These schools are of 3 classes: national, regional, and state. The public offices of the nation are grouped in 4 divisions. The first division, public trust, pertains principally to the national administration, and all office holders of this group must be graduates of both regional and national schools of statesmanship. Individuals may accept political, elective, or appointed office in the second division upon graduating from any one of 10 regional schools of statesmanship. There are trust and responsibility in the regional administration and the state government. Division 3 includes state responsibility. In such offices, officials are only required to have state degree of statesmanship. The third and last division of office holders are not required to hold statesmanship degrees. Such offices, being wholly appointed, they represent minor positions of assistantship, secretaryship, and technical trust, which are discharged by the various non-professions functioning in governmental administration capacity.
Okay, so what's the difference between our politicians and the politicians on this planet?
They're well trained.
They're well trained.
Educated, yeah.
They're trained in statesmanship. They've got degrees, every single one of them, in how to run the country and how to do it properly. Not some attorney that's decided I'm going to get rich going into politics, right? So that's the big difference. Makes it it's very important.
Judges of the minor and state courts hold degrees from the state schools of statesmanship. Judges of the jurisdictional tribunals of social, educational, and industrial matters hold degrees from the regional schools. Judges of the federal Supreme Court must hold degrees from all these schools of statesmanship.
So the judges have to have all 3 degrees, right? 2, schools of philosophy. These schools are affiliated with the temples of philosophy and are more or less associated with the religion as a public function. Miller.
Institutions of science. These technical schools are coordinated with industry rather than with the educational system and are administered under 15 divisions.
Okay, number 4, professional training school. These special institutions provide the technical training for the various learned professions, 12 in number.
5, military and naval schools. Near the national headquarters and at the 25 coastal military centers are maintained those institutions devoted to the military training of volunteer citizens from 18 to 30 years of age. Perennial consent is required before 25 in order to gain entrance to these schools.
That's what they have for the military. 9, the plan of universal suffrage. Although candidates for all public officers are restricted to graduates of the state, regional, and federal schools of statesmanship, the progressive leaders of this nation discovered a serious weakness in their plan of universal suffrage about 50 years ago, made constitutional provision for a modified scheme of voting which embraces the following features.
1. Every man and woman of 20 years and over has one vote. Upon attaining this age, all citizens must accept membership in 2 voting groups. They will join the first in accordance with their economic function, industrial, professional, agricultural, or trade. They will enter the second group according to their political, philosophic, and social inclinations. All workers thus belong to some economic franchise group. And these guilds, like the non-economic associations, are regulated much as is the national government with its threefold divisions of powers. Registration in these groups cannot be changed for 12 years.
And once you get in a group, you're stuck there for the period of 12 years for your vote. Upon nominated by the... Oh, I'm going to read again. Rodney?
Number 2, upon nomination by the state governor or by the regional executives and by the mandate of the regional supreme councils, individuals who have rendered great service to society or who have demonstrated extraordinary wisdom in government service may have additional votes conferred upon them, not generally than every 5 years, and not to exceed 9 such supervention. The maximum support of any multiple voter is 10. Scientists, inventors, teachers, philosophers, and spiritual leaders are also thus recognized and honored with augmented political power. These advanced privileges are conferred at state and regional supreme councils, much as decreed or bestowed by the social college, and the recipient are proud to attach the symbols of civic recognition along with their other decrees to their list of personal achievements.
So no citizen will receive more than 10 votes, and they're awarded these according to their position and that sort of thing. Okay?
3, all individuals sentenced to compulsory labor in the mines and all governmental servants supported by tax funds are, for the periods of such services, disenfranchised. This does not apply to aged persons who may be retired on pensions at 65.
Okay, so if you don't work, you don't get a vote. All right, there are 5 brackets of suffrage reflecting the average yearly taxes paid for each half-decade period. Heavy taxpayers are permitted extra votes up to 5. This grant is dependent on all other recognition, but in no case can any person casts over 10 ballots. Millie?
Where are we?
Number 5, at this time, the franchise plan.
That's me.
Yep.
At this time, the franchise plan was adopted. The territorial method of voting was abandoned in favor of the economic and functional system. All citizens now vote as members of industrial, social, or professional groups, regardless of their residence. Thus, the electorate consists of solidified, unified, and intelligent groups who elect only their best members to positions of government, trust, and responsibility. There is one exception to this scheme of function or group suffrage. The election of a federal chief executive every 6 years is by nationwide ballot, and no citizen casts over one vote.
So when they elect their chief executive, everybody gets one vote and one vote only.
So that's equivalent to their president of the United, or president of
Yeah,
the
our
continent.
president, right.
Okay, thus, except in the election of the chief executive, suffrage is exercised by economic, professional, intellectual, and social groupings of the citizenry. The ideal state is unhappy, and every free and intelligent group of citizens represent a vital and functional organ within the larger governmental organism.
The schools of statesmanship have power to start proceedings in the state courts looking towards the disenfranchisement of any defective, idle, indifferent, or criminal individual. These people recognize that when 50% of a nation is inferior or defective and possesses the ballot, such a nation is doomed. They believe the dominance of mediocrity spills the downfall of any nation. Voting is compulsory, heavy fines being assessed against all who fail to cast their ballots.
Do y'all see a problem in our country?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when 50% of a nation is inferior or defective and possess the ballot, such a nation is doomed.
Is a person that has a felony or has been in prison or something, are they allowed to vote?
No.
They are not.
Yeah,
In
normally
our
not.
country.
In our country, no, they're not.
They're not.
normally. Unless they're pardoned. If you're pardoned, you're not. But it's just like if you've...
Some people who have been in jail for minor things have,
Yeah.
after a certain length of time, can vote,
Yeah, but
Okay.
not for...
not felons.
Not felons,
Not
like
felons,
major
okay.
crimes. The other thing is if you go AWOL from the military in this country, you're not, never allowed to vote again.
Okay.
So there's certain consequences for your actions, any way you look at it. Am I at you?
Yes, that is.
Yes.
10. Dealing with crime. The method of this people in dealing with crime, insanity, and degeneracy, in some ways pleasing, will no doubt in others prove shocking to most Urantians. Ordinary criminals and defectives are placed by sexes in different agricultural colonies and are more than self-supporting. The more serious habitual criminals and incurably insane are sentenced to death in the lethal gas chambers by the courts. Numerous crimes, aside from murder, including betrayal of government trust, there it is, also carry the death penalty, and the visitation of justice is sure and swift. So they think one of the most heinous crimes you can do is betray your trust. Millie.
These people are passing out of the negative into the positive area of law. Recently, they have gone so far as to attempt the prevention of crime by sentencing those who are believed to be potential murderers and major criminals to life service in the detention colonies. If such convicts subsequently demonstrate that they have become more normal, they may be either paroled or pardoned. The homicide rate on this continent is only 1% of that among the other nations.
Efforts to prevent the breeding of criminals and detectives were begun over 100 years ago and have already yielded gratifying results. There are no prisons or hospitals for the insane. For one reason, there are only about 10% as many of these groups as are found on ranches.
11, military preparedness. Graduates at the federal military schools may be commissioned as guardians of civilization in 7 ranks in accordance with ability and experience by the President of the National Council of Defense. This council consists of 25 members nominated by the highest perennial educational and industrial tribunals, confirmed by the Federal Supreme Court, and presided over ex officio by the Chief of Staff of Coordinated Military Affairs. Such members serve until they are 70 years of age. Wow.
Keep the good ones as long as they can. The courses pursued by such commissioned officers are 4 years in length and are invariably correlated with the mastery of some trade or profession. Military training is never given without the associated industrial, scientific, or professional schooling. When military training is finished, the individual has, during his 4 years course, received 1/2 of the education imparted by any of the special schools where the courses are likewise 4 years in length. In this way, the creation of a professional military class is avoided by providing this opportunity for a large number of men to support themselves while securing the first half of a technical or professional training.
Our graduates from West Point and maybe Annapolis, I don't know, graduate with engineering degrees.
Yes, yeah. And many people go in the military and come out with a degree. I did that myself. When I went in the Navy, by the time I graduated, I had a degree. So, military paid for it. So,
Good deal.
yeah. I think you're right.
Military service during peacetime is purely voluntary, and the enlistments in all branches of the service are for 4 years, during which every man pursues some special line of study in addition to the mastery of military tactics. Training in music is one of the chief pursuits of the Central Military Schools and of the 25 training camps distributed about the periphery of the continent. During periods of industrial slackness, many thousands of unemployed are automatically utilized in upbuilding the military defenses of the continent on land and sea and in the air.
System that works, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Although these people maintain a powerful warrant establishment as a defense against invasion by the surrounding hostile people, it may be recorded to their credit that they have not, in over 100 years, employed these military resources in an offensive war. They have become civilized to that point where they can vigorously defend civilization without yielding to the temptation to utilize their war powers in aggression. There have been no civil war since the establishment of the United Continental States. But during the last 2 centuries, these people have been called upon to wage 9 fierce defensive conflicts, 3 of which were against the confederations of world powers. Although this nation maintained adequate defense against attack by hostile nations, it pays far more attention to the training of statesmen, scientists, and philosophers.
So they defend themselves rigorously when they're attacked. Okay?
When at peace with the world, all mobile defense mechanisms are quite fully employed in trade, commerce, and recreation. When war is declared, the entire nation is mobilized. Throughout the period of hostilities, military pay obtains in all industries, and the chiefs of all military departments become members of the chief executive's cabinet.
So everyone gets involved in the civil war. The other nations. Although the society and government of this unique people are in many respects superior to those of the Urantia nations, it should be stated that on the other continents, there are 11 on this planet, the governments are decidedly inferior to the more advanced nations of Urantia. So the other nations on this planet are worse off than we are, right? Really?
There are 11 continents on this planet.
Yeah.
Just now, this superior government is planning to establish ambassadorial relations with the inferior peoples. And for the first time, a great religious leader who has arisen, who advocates the sending of missionaries to those surrounding nations. We fear that they are about to make the mistake that so many others have made when they have endeavored to force a superior culture and religion upon other races. What a wonderful thing could be done on this world if this continental nation of advanced culture would only go out and bring to itself the best of the neighboring peoples, and then, after educating them, send them back as emissaries of culture to their benighted brethren. Of course, if a magisterial son should soon come to this advanced nation, the great things could quickly happen on this world.
What are they talking about in this paragraph? They're talking about doing exactly what the Calgaster 100 did, right? They brought people in, then sent them back to the tribes so they could teach them themselves in the tribes. Adam and Eve would have done the same thing, right? So this is the best way to, spread the good news of society to other more backward people.
That would happen. That could happen in the United States as well.
That's right.
Well, and that's why the Urantia book is designed, to read it, study it, and then to teach it to others as you have the ability and the opportunities.
Did you take the next one, Rodney?
Yeah, this was, I think this was written about 80 years ago.
What?
So it makes you wonder what became.
I know, they've probably come a long way since this was written, I'm sure.
Hey, this recital of the affairs of a neighboring planet is made by special commission with the intent of advancing civilization and augmenting governmental evolution in Urantia. Much more could be narrated that would no doubt interest and intrigue Urantians, but this disclosure covers the limits of our permissive mankind.
So this paper was given to us to help us straighten out our own government, okay? And it's a pity we can't send a copy of this to every single government official in the world, And it's kind of funny because when the Urantia book came out in 1934, 1935, the foundation did just that. They sent it out to every government official that was out there.
Wasn't that in 1955 when the first published books
Yeah,
came out?
I mean in 1955, yeah, when it was first.
I think I told you that someone came into my bookstore and he said he worked for the State Department and he asked for the Urantia book, and what I gave him was paperback, and he said, well, it's paperback, and I said, I can get you a hardback if you want one. He said, I have a hardback. He said, State Department gave it to me, gave it to all of us. Most of what's in this book is the truth.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, oh no, now I gotta read it. Because I had seen it and chose not to pick it up and read it. I thumbed through it, and I'd saw a copy here and a copy there, but I knew it was way beyond my understanding.
At the time.
But he said State Department gave him this and gave it to everybody, and most of what's in it was true.
And what state was that, Is
I
that here?
didn't ask him what State Department.
Okay.
That's interesting, huh?
It is. All right, go ahead.
Urantians should, however, take note that their sister sphere in the Satania family has benefited by neither magisterial nor bestowal missions of the Paradise Sons. Neither are the various peoples of Urantia set off from each other by such disparity of culture as separates the continental nation from its planetary fellows.
Interesting. The pouring out of the Spirit of truth provides the spiritual foundation for the realization of great achievements in the interest of the human race of the bestowal order, which we've had. Right? Urantia is therefore far better prepared for the more immediate realization of a planetary government with its laws, mechanisms, symbols, conventions, and language, all of which could contribute so mightily to the establishment of worldwide peace under law and could lead to the sometime dawning of the real age of spiritual striving. And such an age is the planetary threshold to the utopian ages of light and life. And this was presented by Melchizedek of Lebanon. So this last paragraph tells us that we have the benefit, because of the pouring out of the Spirit of truth, to do even more than this continent does if we just make the changes that's needed. And reading and learning this.
That continent is separated. It's off from everything else, and we are very integrated
That's
with
right.
the rest of our planet.
It gives us leaps and bounds ahead, because if we can adopt something like in this paper, then we could go leaps and bounds in front of them, right? We really could.
So Roger, obviously, a spirit of truth has not been poured out on that planet.
Yes. Yeah, because it was poured out on all the planets, right? In Satania. So.
Oh, what?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was just poured out on the ranch.
No, it was poured out on all those planets that were ready for it. So.
I won't remember.
Yeah. And so the next time, the Garden of Eden, how they got back to it. You know, we did this about 4 years ago.
We did.
Yeah.
This is my favorite part.
Yeah. And we're going to do it again. So thank you all for coming. Let's have a quick prayer. We'll close for the night. Sweetie, would you like to pray first?
Dearest Heavenly Father and Mother God, we thank you so very much for this lesson tonight, and thank you for the wisdom and for the abilities that are portrayed in this wonderful planet that's so close to us. Thank you, and help us to add to our knowledge and understanding, and to pass this on to others, and pass books on to few people that we meet along the way on our journey. We just are so grateful for this study group, and give you all the thanks and praise, Jesus Christ, Michael, and Lebanon. Amen.
Amen. And thank you at home for joining us. Please come see us again. We're having increased numbers. Listen to our papers, so the word's spreading a little bit. Good night, everybody.